Joining us now, very excited, the national campaign manager, Trump for President. He's been there from the very beginning since day one, and he's become an iconic figure in America, is my good friend Corey Lewandowski. Corey, great to have you, man.
John, you're the greatest, and not only have I been here since day one, you have been here since day one, so thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I was the first person in the world to predict that Donald Trump would be the nominee, and I'm closing in right now. Things are looking very good, and I'm excited about being in Manhattan on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then in Pennsylvania after that. I think you guys are going to have a wonderful 6 days. I want to get, Corey, to the Florida situation yesterday. I had done a piece on your situation called The Politics of Personal Destruction. I thought the whole thing was a trumped-up sham. Yesterday, you were exonerated. Can you expand on that for our audience?
Well, first, let me first say how thankful and grateful I am to have such a great boss like Mr. Trump, and for his loyalty, and for not doing what every other politician would have done in his position. And I also want to thank my colleagues and my friends and my family for their support during what's been a really difficult time, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And it's been a really tough experience and one of the worst experiences, unfortunately, I've had to go through. And it's been a big distraction for the campaign. So I'm glad, that the Palm Beach County District Attorney's Office looked at this and realized that there was no case to move forward with and dismissed all the charges. But let me just stop for a second and ask your listeners, how do we end up here? This tape, this video, which I am so thankful Mr. Trump had from his golf course on that night in question, exonerated me. But the media looked at this and made it a feeding frenzy. And, there were very, very few pundits, and you were one of those who looked at this tape and said, wow, is this really what America has come to? Right. We've come to the world of political correctness. And if Mr. Trump didn't have that videotape and didn't have the opportunity to turn that over to first the police department, then ultimately the Palm Beach County District Attorney's Office, we could be in a very different position right here. Because I was, the accusation against me, which, was a very serious accusation, was one that said, let me just read it to you. Campaign managers aren't supposed to forcefully throw reporters to the ground, no matter the circumstances. Nobody was thrown to the ground. And that was the accusation, that was the charge. And if we didn't have the video footage to show otherwise, who knows what could have happened. So I'm very thankful and grateful that this has been resolved. But the interesting part, John, in this whole system, this whole thing, was Michelle Fields never once, and to this day still has never, contacted this campaign to say something took place that evening. We first learned about it from Michelle's boyfriend's Twitter feed a few hours later. And, I made a phone call that night, which has never been reported, to Michelle Fields. And I turned over my phone records to show that phone call took place. Because once I read about what was supposedly had transpired, I wanted to get to the bottom of it, and I wanted to resolve it in the easiest way possible. But she wasn't interested in doing that. She was interested in becoming a story. And so she decided to go on television and, perpetuate a narrative which the videotape showed did not actually occur. So I'm happy it's over. I'm glad it's over. I'm focused on making sure we get Donald Trump, 1,237 delegates prior to the convention, and ultimately making sure that not only is he going to be the Republican nominee, but that we have the opportunity to put a Republican in the White House for the first time in 8 long years.
Well, listen, Corey, we are excited that you got exonerated because I looked at that tape over and over again, and when I did my column, I just couldn't believe what was happening, and that's why I thought it was the politics of personal destruction, and there was a hidden agenda there, and now I'm glad that it's all worked out. And I've been to so many of those things, as I said to my audience, where I've been jostled and pushed over. And I mean, they're events where everybody's trying to get to the candidate. I thought the whole thing was a complete sham and a scam from day one. And I'm glad it played out. And, the accountability factor of those in the media, and I'm glad you brought this up, there has to be an accountability factor for those that published this in such a way that made it appear that you had done something nefarious. And it was almost, a lot of the stuff was just made up. It was just poppycock. And, journalists have we got to have some responsibility to the truth. And it was all missed there. And I think it was a sad day, the way this whole thing went down. And in some instances, made me ashamed of the industry that I'm in. Because, I mean, there's got to be some truth going on. That was an effort to discredit you personally and to hurt the campaign. And that's what that whole thing was about. It had nothing to do with Michelle Fields or anything else. It was an attack on you personally and the campaign.
Well, it was, and I'm glad it's over. But let me say, the media didn't want the real story. And look, I don't want to be this mainstream media narrative person who thinks that the press is entirely bad. I don't think all of them are. I think maybe a large portion of them are. But this is a narrative that they want to perpetuate,
right.
And that's the bottom line. And you know what? They could have gone and done their homework. And there were some reporters out there, to be fair, who said, "Look, in this country, this is still the greatest country in the world, and you are still innocent until proven guilty."
Right.
And there were very, very few people out there who said that. And all we heard about was, "Oh, this is terrible, this is terrible. What are we going to do? This person should be fired." John Kasich and Ted Cruz both recommended to the media that I be fired immediately. And that's not what this country is about.
That's
and
right.
You know how many people have been railroaded by something and their boss didn't stand behind them?
That's right.
Whether it was a truck driver who gets a speeding ticket on the highway and their boss says, "Well, I got to let you go." Right? That's the problem with this country, and that's why we need a strong leader, because these other guys, they're weak, they will fold, they will not stand up for what is right, and that's the difference with Donald Trump. Donald Trump could have made his life a lot easier and said, "Corey, you know what? I can't have this. You've got to go. You and your family and your children, you go figure it out on your own. I can't be part of this." He didn't do that.
No.
He doubled down. He said, "I'm not going to ruin a man's life over something that is not factually correct. This woman wasn't thrown to the ground. That's not what took place. I've seen the video footage. I'm going to stand by these people like I would stand up for our country and make sure that we put our people first." And that is a huge difference here, John. Every other politician, it doesn't matter who it is, would say, "Nope, this person's got to go," because their first inclination is to save themselves, and not about loyalty and not about doing what the right thing to do is, but that's how these politicians think, and that's why the American people are tired of it. They want somebody who's tough and strong and is willing to say words like radical Islamic terrorism when our country is being attacked by terrorists.
Right.
That's what they want. The
Right.
American people are smart, and they know and they can take the truth when someone tells it to them. And these other politicians, these guys who are all talk, no action, want to go and they want to say things that they think the American people want, but not what they actually believe in, and that's the big difference. And so I'm so honored and privileged to have the job that I have and to work for such a great individual who has stood by me and my family in this troubling time.
Well, let's draw a quick comparison, and then we'll move on to another topic. A good friend of mine, Rick Tyler, who was the communications director for Ted Cruz, working like yourself, 60, 70 hours a week, 15, 20 hours a day, traveling on a bus all over the place, made one mistake on social media where he didn't check his facts. He took it down immediately. It was against Senator Rubio. He apologized on TV. He apologized to everybody. Rick Tyler is a really good guy that works hard, and Ted Cruz fired him. Same thing. Fired him the next day. He was coming on my show when they fired him. And so he had to text me, and Trump did the exact opposite. I want a president who is going to stand up for America the way Donald Trump stood up for Corey Lewandowski. When Ted Cruz was in the same situation, he fired Rick Tyler, who made a simple mistake because he was tired, and he apologized. And so I think that's the difference. Look, I'm going to move on. Let's get to the New York primary. I think you're going to win 92 of the 95. You're going to have a great week after that. Then we get to Indiana, winner take all, May 2nd. That's going to be critical. Can you get to 1237, and how do you get there?
So the short answer is yes. Not only can we get to 1237, but we're going to get beyond 1237. There's a couple important things to factor in here. What you remember, if you look at the election as maybe a hockey game, right, which, the first period was Ted Cruz's home. He was in Texas, and he did fairly well down there. And the second period was John Kasich's home, and he did well in Ohio. Well, now the third period is where we are. It's almost at the end of the game. And we've got to do well in New York. And the people who know Donald Trump the best are the people of New York, right, because they know what his investment has been in this state, the jobs that he's created, and we're going to do very, very well on Election Day here in New York. And then you go to states like Connecticut and Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island. A lot of those people rely on the city of New York for their income. A lot of people from Connecticut commute in. And this notion that Ted Cruz has said New York values are something that the American people don't want and respect, I think is such a pejorative thing to say. I think it's so disgusting because the great people of the city of New York, they rallied around what took place here after 9/11. And as you know, and it's been widely reported, something that's very personal to me. And I've lost a lot of friends on that day. And, the people of New York are great people. And they rebuilt the city, and those are the values that our country needs. And this notion that Senator Cruz continues to insinuate that the values of New York are not the values of our country, I think are really shameful. And I think the voters are going to remember that. And I think it's very possible come Election Day in New York on Tuesday, Ted Cruz will finish a very distant third and will receive no delegates, and then he will be basically mathematically eliminated from being the Republican nominee. And once that's the case, he has to make the argument of why he'd still be in this race. The bottom line is Donald Trump is going to do very well on Tuesday. We're hoping to do very well the following week in those additional 5 states. Then we'll go to Indiana. And not only will we have 1,237 delegates, which is the requisite number for us prior to going into the convention, we'll have many, many more than that. But in addition to that, once Ted Cruz is mathematically eliminated, as John Kasich is right now, the question becomes, why are you still running? Are you running because you think you're going to be the president, or you're running because you're trying to stop Donald Trump right now? And you know what? Why don't we bring the party together? Why don't we make sure that everyone has the same singular focus? And that focus is putting a Republican in the White House for the first time in 8 years. And the only candidate in this race who can, one, still become the Republican nominee is Donald Trump, and number 2, expand the map over the states that Mitt Romney won last time, that Ted Cruz cannot expand, is Donald Trump. So the goal is very simple. Go out and win as many delegates as possible in New York and the states moving forward, all the way through New Jersey and California, and then bring the party together. Make sure everyone understands that we have one singular focus, and that focus is making sure that we do not allow a Democrat in the White House for 8 more years.
Well, that's got to be the focus, no question. So you sound pretty confident of getting to 1237 and beyond. Let's get to palace intrigue. A lot of play in the media now. Your campaign has hired some very senior advisors, Paul Manafort being one, Rick Wiley that ran the Scott Walker campaign also joining your team. A lot of people in the media saying there's some kind of a split. I looked at your title. You're still the campaign manager. That means at the end of the day, you're accountable at the end. Is there any truth to the rumor that your campaign, Corey, has split into factions?
Well, there's no truth to it. And let me say, we have run, I think many people know, a very small, lean campaign operation up until this point. And the issue that we have now is that we need to grow. And if we want to be successful, not only in the primary election season, but in the general election, we need to grow. And Paul Manafort is an expert on chasing delegates and making sure that we've got that 1,237 delegates needed to lock up the nomination. But more than that, he's a political expert. And so we're going to make sure that we're working together in everything we do. Rick Wiley and I have been in discussions about him coming to this campaign for probably 4 or 5 weeks, and we finally reached a resolution. He's come on board now. We're going to continue to bring the best operatives in the country into the fold so that we are giving the best advice we can to Mr. Trump, making sure that if there are difficult situations in front of us, we collectively look at all the options and then present the best solution to him. It doesn't do us any good at all to keep a small, tight-knit organization that doesn't win. And it's good for everybody to bring more people in. And look, I tell this story often now. I was watching CNN the other night, and they had the story of Bill Clinton running against George H.W. Bush for the presidency in 1992. And I was watching the CNN story, and in that room, in the Clinton campaign, there were about 25 absolute killers on that team. I mean, absolute just killers. George Stephanopoulos, James Carville, Paul Pagala. I mean, guy after guy after guy and woman who were just at very, very best, 25 years later, still in the business. That's what we're doing here. We're building the best team humanly possible so that we can make the best decisions with the same goal. And that goal is to make sure Donald Trump is first the nominee, and secondly, elected president of the United States, and I'm part of that team, and I'm proud to be part of it.
Now, your campaign has been criticized by not a stellar effort in getting Trump delegates to go to the national convention in Cleveland. I mean, we've seen this play out in a lot of different areas. Virginia is coming up. That's one of them. We just lost at District 9 where you got an overwhelming percentage. We only got 1 out of the 3. Are you guys looking at this? Because if you do go to a second ballot, those people in Cleveland elected to national delegates are going to have to stand behind Trump.
Well, there's no question about it, but let me be clear. While the aye is not on the second ballot, the aye is on the first ballot. We need to be successful on the first ballot, and everything else is important, but we're going to win on the first ballot. We're going to have more than the 1,237 delegates, so we're going to win there. But let me say something, and this is a very important point to make. Look at what just took place in Colorado. The GOP establishment there said, we're not going to have a primary. We're not going to have a convention. We're just going to dictate who basically is going to be the nominee. 1 million voters in the state of Colorado were not given the opportunity to vote. And I think that's fundamentally wrong. And I think what you find is in states where people are given the opportunity to go in and cast their ballot, Donald Trump does exceptionally well, right? So if you can be an independent, you can be a Republican, you can be anything you want to be, but you have to be given the right to vote. That's what this basic country, one of the basic premises of this country has been and continues to be: one man, one vote. Not you get to run for delegate for literally 10 seconds in the state of Colorado. That was your pitch. You had 10 seconds to make a pitch to become a delegate. That's a broken system. And you know what that means? It means all those people who wanted to participate and couldn't, they say, look, we're tired of this system. I understand what the rules are, but it doesn't mean they're right. So why are we afraid to open up the electoral process and let the people who are working every day, who have regular lives, who maybe aren't party activists or party supporters, why are we afraid to let those people go out and vote?
Right.
We've seen what happens when we do that. In states like Arizona, Donald, the lines were 4 hours long for people to show up and vote on primary night. Don't we want more participation?
Yes.
As opposed to less? And that's everything that's wrong with the system, is the party elites and the party bosses. You know, there's another state, and I don't want to mention it, but you know how you become a delegate? Depends on how much money you've given to the party. Depends on if you've run for office before. Depends on how many activities you've done on behalf of the party. There's a scoring system in place, literally. And guess what? Mary Smith, who's got a day job, who's trying to just make ends meet because she's got 2 kids at home and is a single parent, you know what? She hasn't had extra money to give to the party, and she hasn't had the ability to go run for office, and she hasn't had the ability to go and volunteer at a state party headquarters to get enough points to be a delegate. That's not what the system is. Mm-hmm. The system is everybody should have the opportunity to go and vote, to choose the person that they want, and then those people are the ones that should be representing and voting for the nominee that was chosen. That's the whole point of the system, and the GOP establishment is trying to change that so that they can control the system because they don't want a fundamental change in Washington, which is what Donald Trump will bring.
Corey Lewandowski, we're out of time. National Campaign Manager Donald J. Trump for President. You want more info on the Trump campaign? Go to DonaldJTrumpForPresident.com. You want information on us, or if you'd like to give us a campaign donation, you can go to TrumpDelegatesVA.com. And don't forget to register for our Trump Delegates Party May 12th in Chesapeake at Wild Wing. We have a special guest coming, and we're looking forward to that. Corey Lewandowski, congratulations on being exonerated. I'm glad it's over. I look forward to seeing yourself and your team on my special broadcast at Trump Tower Monday and Tuesday.
Thanks, John. Take care. Bye.
All right. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. I'll be right back.